First blessing of the weight, because he put a weight on her. He put an ask on her. Feed me first. That's heavy. Doesn't make sense to the world. What you're carrying doesn't always make sense to everybody else. The weight that's on you doesn't always make sense to the people around you. Make sure you're listening to the right people, and here's why. Because the weight pulls something out of you that was already in you. It didn't come out of you until the weight was on you. Why? Because the weight puts a demand on your faith. The weight puts a demand on something that was already on the inside of you. You ever had somebody require something of you? I love to listen to leaders, and John Maxwell is one of my favorite leaders. If you hadn't got his podcast, download his podcast, listen to him. There's another guy that my wife actually introduced me to, and he's a real estate mogul, and he's an entrepreneur. His name's Ed Mylett. Some of you guys have heard of Ed Mylett, and he's just a powerhouse speaker and just encouraging and just fires you up. Also, he's super jacked, so he walks around like this. And he was telling this story about when he was a kid. He comes from an Italian family, and he said, when I was a kid, he said the kids in the neighborhood called him Eddie Spaghetti. And they would say, Eddie Spaghetti, your spaghetti is ready. And he said the kid that started all this was a kid named Ray Ray. And he said, this kid was a punk. And he said, he beat me up on average 3 to 5 times a week. He just skull drugged me all the time. And he said, it was frustrating, it was infuriating. And here's why, because he lived right next to me. And he said their family was just a rough family. They were a hard family. We were a little bit more of a close-knit, tight family. They were just rough and tough. And he said, I remember one time, Ray just put it on me in the front yard. He said, I came running home, screaming and crying. Mama hit the screen door. She saw me, bloody, came running. She said, oh, baby, what happened? She said, Ray beat me up. She said, oh, baby, I'm so sorry. Their family is not like us. Their daddy has been in jail. They are crazy people. You just stay away from them. And he said, well, Mama's just hugging me. He said, I heard the steps of my father coming down the hall. And he said, what's going on in here? He said, I thought certain at this point my dad is gonna go take on Big Ray. And he said, my mother looked up and said, that criminal next door has beat our son again. And he said, my dad did something different. He looked at my mom and he said, get your hands off of him. Boy, look at me. You ever had a dad like that? You thought he's gonna take up for you, but he didn't. He said, here's what's supposed to happen. He said, you're gonna go next door. You're gonna knock on the door. And you're gonna whip Ray Ray's butt. And if you don't whip his butt, don't come home for dinner. My dad did that to me one time. He was like, Daddy, I can't do it. Don't come back up. Don't you darken the door of this house till you whip his butt. He says, I went next door, cried. He said, I knocked on their screen door. He said, Big Ray answered the door, no shirt on, tatted up. What's up, little lad? What you need, man? He goes, my dad said that I better come over here and whip Ray or I can't come home for dinner. He said, Big Ray looked at him and said, oh, this is my kind of party. Ray, come on out here, boy. Little Ed wants some. He said, little Ray came in like a bulldog, just took his shirt off, just He said, Dad set him up on one side, on the other side. I said, all right, ready, 2, 3, get it on. And he said, Ray just charged him. And he said, by some blessing of God, when he charged me, he said, I got him in a headlock. And when he got him in a headlock, he said, I didn't know what to do with him. So I did what my dad and my brothers had always done to me when I was in a headlock. I just started giving him a noogie. He said, I noogied him so hard, I noogied him into submission. He started crying, stop. And he said, Big Ray was like, all right, that's it. He put it on you, son. He said, he made us shake hands, and he said, that was the day that I whipped Ray. I thought it was a great story. He said, there's one part. He said, I told this story 1,000 times. There's one part that he said, my mother heard me tell it a couple of years ago. And she said, Ed, you have to start telling them this other part. But she said it's relevant. I don't think it's relevant, but I'll tell you because my mom told me to tell you. I was 7, Ray was 4. But whatever, it is what it is. I mean, y'all remember that little kid that was just, But here's what I want you to understand about this story. Ed wouldn't have stopped the bullying until his father put a demand on him. Now, I'm not telling you to go beat up every bully in your life. Please don't hear that. But please hear that you won't always be able to make peace with the bully. At some point, you're gonna have to realize the God on the inside of me is greater than the giant in front of me, and I've got to use my faith to fight for what God has promised me. At some point, you've got to realize that the weight is gonna pull something out of you that was already in you, but it didn't come out of you until the weight was on you. Some of you have been praying, God, remove this weight. And God's going, if I remove this weight, you will stay there. But if I put the weight on you and I let you carry it, some of you are better in a battle. You wonder why you're fighting all the time. Here's why, because you don't pray unless you're in a fight. The marriage starts getting hard and all of a sudden you're like, oh God, please fix her. You didn't even talk to God whenever she was bringing you a sandwich. Oh, I'm preaching good on a Sunday. Why do you think we encourage you to go through Growth Track? We encourage you to get in a group. We encourage you to get on the dream team. We encourage you to go to a serve project. I just don't have time. Getting in a group, and then you want me to start a group, and that's hard. Well, can't I just come to church with no weight? Can't I just live for God? Check off the box and not carry any weight? Well, yeah, little weight, little promises. Little weight, little blessings. Little weight, little miracles. But what if God is calling something more out of you? Can I tell you this? Listen, if it was gonna be easy, following Jesus would never involve a cross. He said, if any man would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. What does that mean? It's going to involve a weight, and it's not gonna be easy.